Have you ever felt lost or unsure about the direction of your life? Maybe you have achieved success and yet still feel unfulfilled. Perhaps you have experienced loss or disappointment and are struggling to find meaning in your life. If you are feeling this way, you are not alone. It's a question that has perplexed philosophers and thinkers for centuries. We are going on a journey with The Monk and the Philosopher, a book that offers two different perspectives on this timeless question, written by John Francois Revel, a philosopher, and Matthew Ricard, a Buddhist monk. They discussed how Eastern Buddhism philosophy, a way of life and thinking, differs from Western philosophy. This book takes us on a quest to discover the meaning of life. Let's embark on this journey together. The younger man, a doctor of molecular biology, worked for some time with Nobel Prize winning French biologist Francois Jacob and Jacques Monod. Then, still early in his career, he surprised family and friends by leaving Paris for an apprenticeship with spiritual masters in Darjeeling, India, and now lives in Nepal and devotes much of his time to Tibetan literature. The older man, Ricard's father, is a philosopher and political commentator. Sometimes the answers we seek are found not in the destinations, but in the journey, and that's exactly what we'll discover as we will embark on our quest to discover the meaning of life. We'll encounter obstacles and challenges along the way, from the conversations between father and the son, but with each steps we will gain new insights and understanding.
West's been a civilization of action, acting on the world to transform it by knowledge of its laws, the knowledge of technological invention, the invention of the steam engine, the use of electricity, the invention of the telescope and the microscope, the use of nuclear energy, for better or for worse. There's the atom bomb, but also nuclear power stations. All that comes from the West. So acting on the world isn't just a matter of having some spiritual influence on people like oneself, but of a real change in the very substance of the world we live in, and the creation of instruments that were totally unimaginable 5 centuries ago. These are tools that have radically changed human life. If we've understood it properly, Buddhism says that action of that sort on the world, in the end, is superfluous, doesn't it? The well-being that the improved living conditions resulting from technological progress are certainly not to be despised.
But experience shows that such progress only solves the secondary problems. You can travel faster, see further, go up higher, go down, lower, and so on.
But you can live longer, cure more diseases. Again, let's take a concrete example. In India, next door to here, man's life expectancy has risen from 29 in 1900 to 53 today. Of course, one could say that if a man is too miserable, there's no point in his living long. In that case, he'd do better to die at 29 than at 53. But for someone profiting from all these discoveries, his life is both longer and more tolerable. That introduces a dimension that didn't exist in ancient philosophies. Not to be sick and not to die at 29 is also a way of escaping from suffering. The Western conception of happiness includes, among other things, the prolonging of human life, being able to treat disease more effectively, being able to travel 50 kilometers without having to walk in the mud for 2 days, and other minor aspects of the kind, like not dying of appendicitis at the age of 10, which is probably what would have happened to me had it not been for the invention of modern surgery and antisepsis. If Western-style happiness was of so little interest, why so much frenzy in the East to copy and adopt it?
The idea of the right way is often the middle one. By all means, let's live a longer life thanks to medical progress, and use it wisely thanks to spiritual values. I'm not trying to minimize the importance of any material progress that allows suffering to be assuaged. The East is grateful to the West for progress in medicine and increased life expectancy. These are things everyone appreciates. But on the other side, a civilization oriented almost exclusively toward that form of action on the world clearly lacks something essential that material progress can never bring. Indeed, it's not what it's designed to do. The proof is that Western society is now feeling just that, and, with a frenzy that's sometimes clumsy, is seeking all sorts of recipes for wisdom borrowed from the East or from the past. That lack appears clearly in the confusion so many minds are plunged into, in the violence that reigns in the inner cities, in the selfishness that governs so many human relationships, in the sad resignation of all those spending their last years in old people's homes, and in the despair of suicide. If spiritual values stop being an inspiration for a society, material progress becomes a sort of facade that masks the pointlessness of life. Of course, to live longer is to profit from an increased opportunity of giving meaning to life. But if you neglect that opportunity and just aspire to a long and comfortable existence, the value of human life becomes altogether artificial. Study of the aging process at a cellular level has made considerable progress. In the laboratory, the lifespan of nematodes and flies can now be doubled. It's not inconceivable that, one day, it might be possible to double or triple the length of human life. But such a perspective underlines even more the need to give some meaning to it. Otherwise, we'll just run the risk of having to live out 200 years of depression or 300 years of bad moods. What's more, the destructive sides of technological progress have developed no less than its beneficial sides. And in some cases, pollution, for example, have overtaken them. Our perception of an object as desirable or undesirable doesn't reside in the object itself, but in the way we perceive it. There's no inherent quality in a beautiful object that does the mind any good, nor anything in an ugly object that might harm it. If human beings were to disappear, the phenomenal world wouldn't necessarily disappear along with them, but the world as it's perceived by humans would no longer have any basis for its existence. Worlds as they're perceived by other sorts of beings would continue to exist for them. The classic example is that of a glass of water, which is perceived as a habitat by a fish, as a drink by a human. There's a Zen poem, too, which says, to her lover, a beautiful woman is a delight, to an ascetic, a distraction, to a wolf, a good meal. Although they're triggered by objects, our perceptions are, in the end, built up by the mind. When we see a mountain, the first image that comes to us is pure, unfabricated perception. But from the second instant onward, some people will think, oh, that mountain looks dangerous and inhospitable, while others might think that would be a good place to do a retreat. Numerous different thoughts will then follow. If objects were defined by themselves and possessed intrinsic qualities, independent of the subject observing them, everyone ought to perceive them in the same way. Power and money don't bring happiness, that jealousy and pride destroy all the joy in life, and so on. But the fact that it's commonplace absolutely doesn't stop us falling all the time into the trap of our usual preoccupations. Gain and loss, pleasure and pain, praise and blame, fame and obscurity, and feeling totally vulnerable to them. It's not every day that someone tries to stab us in the back, but it's in every moment that we're the prey of our negative emotions. How many unhappy people find their lives wrecked by jealousy? If only they were able to recognize how insubstantial that jealousy really was and let it dissolve in their minds like a cloud vanishing in the sky. Not only would jealousy leave them in peace, but it would certainly never develop to the point of pushing them to commit a crime, as so often happens. Small clouds, as they say, don't bring rain. It's when a thought first arises that you have to do something about it, not when the emotions it engenders get completely out of control. If you don't deal with the spark, what hope do you have of doing something when the whole forest is on fire? According to Buddhism, the conscious isn't just a more and more complex and perfect development of the inanimate. There has to be a qualitative change there, not just a quantitative one. There's nothing wrong with the observation that the gradually increasing complexity of the organization of the nervous system, as forms of life get higher, goes hand in hand with gradually increasing intelligence. But Buddhism holds that even very elementary forms of life are endowed with some form of consciousness, extremely primitive perhaps, but different from matter alone. As you progress up the evolutionary ladder, the faculty of consciousness becomes more and more effective, deep and developed, culminating in human intelligence. So consciousness is manifested to a varying extent in different supporting mechanisms and in different conditions. So where would that consciousness come from, even the very primitive one in some microscopic creature? Buddhism answers that by saying that it can only come from a previous life, according to the law of conservation of consciousness analogous to the conservation of energy in the world of matter. That's not, of course, what science would think at all. Science sees man as an animal among the other animals, an animal in whom one dimension of perceptual consciousness has been particularly developed because of the development of the brain. But it's true that the great mystery, or rather the great leap in the vision of modern science, is the passage from matter to life. When we ask ourselves whether there could be life in other solar systems, in other galaxies, or even on Mars, we're always trying to find out, basically, if the set of factors that have led to the chemical reactions that produce life within matter might have been able to happen on other planets or in other solar systems. But the shift from animal or vegetable life to consciousness over the evolution of living species is perhaps rather less mysterious than the shift from matter to life.
As the monk and the philosopher discussed the meaning of life, they explored the concept of happiness, freedom, and self-awareness. In one conversation, the philosopher reflects on the idea of radical freedom.
Radical freedom means that we are free to choose our own path in life, to make our own decisions, and to take responsibility for our actions. But with that freedom comes a great responsibility. We must be mindful of the choices we make and the consequences they have on ourselves and others.
When we detach ourselves from the external circumstances of our lives, we gain a sense of inner peace and freedom. We are no longer controlled by our desires or our fears, but are free to live in the present moment.
As the conversations between the monk and the philosopher continue, they explore the concept of happiness and how to achieve it. The philosopher argues that true happiness comes from within, not from external circumstances.
Happiness is not something that can be bought or earned. It is a state of being that comes from within. We must learn to cultivate our inner happiness, to find joy in the present moment, and to appreciate the simple things in life.
Happiness is not the goal of life, but the result of living a life filled with purpose and meaning. We must strive to cultivate inner peace and harmony, to live in alignment with our values, and to make a positive impact on the world.
Throughout their conversations, the monk and the philosopher explored the nature of the self and the importance of self-awareness. They discussed the concept of non-self, which suggests that our identity is not fixed, but is constantly changing and evolving.
The concept of non-self challenges us to look beyond our ego and our individual identity and to see ourselves as part of a larger whole. When we recognize that we are interconnected with others and with the world around us, we can cultivate a sense of empathy and compassion.
Through the practice of mindfulness and meditation, we can develop a deeper sense of self-awareness. We can observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment and cultivate a sense of inner peace and equanimity.
As the conversation between the monk and the philosopher come to a close, they reflect on the importance of living a life of service and making a positive impact on the world.
We must strive to make a positive impact on the world, to leave it a better place than we found it. We can do this by living in alignment with our values, by showing compassion and kindness to others, and by working towards a common goal.
The key to living a life of service is to cultivate a sense of interconnectedness with others and with the world around us. When we recognize that we are all interconnected, we can develop a sense of empathy and compassion towards others. We can work towards creating a world that is more just and equitable, and that is filled with peace and harmony.
In the end, Revel and Ricard find that the ultimate reward is not necessarily the answer to the question of the meaning of life, but rather the wisdom they gain from the journey itself. They realize that the meaning of life is not something that can be easily defined, but rather something that must be experienced. So, if you are feeling lost and uncertain about the direction of your life, remember that the answer you seek may not be found in a simple definition or explanation. It may require a journey, a process of explorations and discovery. The monk and the philosopher offers a fascinating perspective on this journey, one that can offer insights and wisdom to anyone seeking meaning in their life. The West has produced antibiotics that save human lives, and the East has spent its time giving meaning to existence. The idea of medicine is to allow everyone to live to 100 or more without losing any teeth. The goal of the spiritual path is to eliminate any trace of pride, jealousy, hatred, cupidity, and so on from the current of consciousness, and become incapable of doing anything harmful to others. Our Western society, by and large, is no longer oriented toward quest of that kind. To us, they seem out of reach. Why not combine both approaches? There's nothing to stop a sage using the benefits of medicine or air travel, but he would never give such convenience the same importance as the spiritual quest. Spiritual and temporal can be combined in an intelligent and constructive way, as long as one remains aware of their respective importance.
Quotation from Erwin Schrödinger, the great physicist who was awarded a Nobel Prize in 1933. The image of the world around us that science provides is highly deficient. It supplies a lot of factual information and puts all our experience in magnificently coherent order, but keeps terribly silent about everything close to our hearts, everything that really counts for us.
And so, as we reflect on the conversations between the monk and the philosopher, we are reminded of the importance of living a life of purpose and meaning. We are encouraged to cultivate inner peace and harmony, to live in alignment with our values, and to make a positive impact on the world. Thank you for joining us on this journey of self-discovery and wisdom. We hope the insights from the monk and the philosopher have inspired you to live a more meaningful and fulfilling life. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge and wisdom.